Welcome, I'm Charles Bernard, and I'm a professional paperback book cover illustrator who also founded the online Art Academy, where you can learn the all-important fundamentals. Without a knowledge and understanding of the fundamentals and an ability to apply them to your own drawings and paintings, your drawings and paintings will remain at the amateur level, at the beginner level. You won't make any progress as an art student unless you learn the fundamentals and are able to apply them. That's how important they are. And at my school, you're going to learn them without spending a fortune. Now, I should mention that my course is like a modern update of the Famous Artist School course that I took, and I also worked at the Famous Artist School, which was located in Westport, Connecticut, for a number of years. And I learned many things about picture making. They really opened my eyes there as to what you need to know and understand and be able to apply to drawings and paintings. Many of the guiding faculty members there were famous illustrators such as Al Parker, Austin Briggs, Norman Rockwell, and of course the great Albert Dorn, who founded the Famous Artist School. And I also learned from many of the art instructors that they had there. And now I started this school teaching those things that I learned at the Famous Artist School, in addition to many other things that I learned after I left the school. If you're a beginner and you have, let's say, a black and white or grayscale painting that you did in Photoshop, and you want to add color to that painting, what a beginner might do is use the various tools in Photoshop to add color to that grayscale, rather than using his or her knowledge of light and what light does to various forms that it falls on that have local color. How does light interact with local color? How does it change local color? What is the color of the light? What is the intensity of the light? What direction is the light coming from? All of these different things you need to know about. Otherwise, what you're going to be doing is just tinting a grayscale painting. And it won't look believable. It won't look convincing because you haven't applied knowledge of light and shadow. You don't know what light does when it falls on forms. So that's something that you need to learn about. Just tinting a grayscale painting to turn it into color is the lazy person's way of adding color. And if you're going to take that path, that route, it leads nowhere. It is only through gaining knowledge of light and shadow that you're going to be able to paint objects that look convincing, that look real. Not just by tinting something. Now, the various tools in Photoshop, of course, can be used to apply color to grayscale. But you need to know what you're doing when you're applying this color. Not just tinting something without having a knowledge of what light does to those forms that you're adding color to. To show you what a beginner might do to add color to a grayscale or black and white painting, I'm going to bring in this rough grayscale painting that I did of this old building that seems to be falling apart. If a beginner hasn't learned how to use light and what it does when it falls on various forms and their local color, then the lazy way to add color, as I mentioned, would be to just tint the grayscale painting. And you can do that by going to the blending modes menu and down to where it says color. And then you select a color from your color picker. Let's say a red. And then red is applied to whatever form you're adding color to. In this case, of course, it's this old, dilapidated building. So now I've added color, but all I've really done is just tint the grayscale. I haven't applied any knowledge of what light does when it falls on this building. And let's say the sky needs to be blue, so the beginner will select a blue from the color picker, and then again, as before, just go over that gray area there of the sky with the blue, and lo and behold, the gray has now turned to blue. The beginner has tinted the sky blue. And then the grass, of course, will be tinted green, and the trees in the distance also green, like this. And I think I'll continue tinting the building in red, so I'm going to go back to the color picker and select red, and then tint the rest of the building red. The beginner, having applied color in this manner, now thinks that he or she has a color painting and there's no more to be done. The problem is that if the beginner doesn't have a knowledge of how to use light and color, this is where the beginner stops. The artist who has a knowledge of how to use light and color goes further than this. Therefore, you can, of course, use the various tools available to you in Photoshop to add color to a grayscale, but it's not a matter of just tinting the grayscale painting. It's after you've added these various tints of color, you then need to apply the knowledge of light and color and shadow to those parts of the painting that you've tinted. So tinting is a way that you can begin to add color, but then you have to take it further than that. And that's where this knowledge of light and shadow and color comes in that I'm talking about. To make a scene look convincing, believable, you need to apply knowledge of what light does to the various forms upon which it falls that have different local colors. So you need to know how the color of the light interacts with the local color of the form upon which it falls. And that means that after having tinted a grayscale painting, then you need to apply that knowledge to that tinted painting. So therefore, in a case like you see here, I now would have to add that knowledge of what light does to these various shapes that I've added color to. So if I have a yellow light source, the sun, let's say, the sun has yellow. The yellow falls upon the red barn. So now you need to understand how that yellow light changes the red barn upon which it falls. So let's say the sun is up here, right there, you see, and shining down on this scene. So the red barn here, which is actually a bit more of a red-violet, let me go to the color picker. See, it's leaning a little toward the red-violet. Now, when that yellow mixes with the red, and I'm going to change this to more of a red color rather than a red-violet like this. So now when that yellow light from the sun mixes with the red of the barn, it's going to turn that red slightly toward the orange. It's going to become something like a red-orange. The two colors are mixing. So something like this. Whereas before, it was just a pure red. But now, the yellow has changed that pure red so that it leans a bit toward the orange. In addition, you're going to need to know what happens to the color in the shadow. How does that change? I can't go into all of that here in one video. It's only by taking an entire course, by watching a lot of videos that talk about what light does when it falls on various forms that have different local colors, that you're really going to begin to gain that kind of knowledge that you need in order to turn your more beginner-looking work into more professional-looking work. In addition to learning about the color of the light source, color of light, you also need to learn about bounce light. Within this scene, the colors that you see here are bounced into other forms, like the green, for example, of the ground here. That green is being bounced into this part, let's say, of the building. So some of that green will appear within that part of the building here, if the building is in shadow. So this part, let's say, is in shadow here, and then it's going to get some of that bounce light. It's also referred to as reflected light. In addition to that, you also need to know about atmosphere. How does atmosphere contribute to changing the colors and creating a more realistic looking painting? You're also going to need to learn about local color and local value. There's a lot to learn. You need to know how they all interact with each other to create a believable, realistic looking painting. And I need to add the word light here. It's bounce light, like that. Or reflected light also. Same thing. To this list, I'm also going to add color of highlights. You need to learn what color do I make the highlight. That is one of the most important things that you're ever going to learn. And I've heard stories of art students graduating from art school for which they paid an enormous amount of money, and they never learned what color to make the highlights. If they were never taught something simple like that, just think about all of the other things that they may not have learned that are more complicated than what color to make the highlights. It could be that they left out many important things. And that's why, if you look at the paintings by students who have graduated from an expensive art school, and then you look at their work years later and you compare what they did after graduating from the art school, you can see that their work wasn't very good. It's only after they came out of art school and they learned all those additional things that they didn't learn in art school that made the big difference between that early work after graduating from art school and then the later work, where they gained additional knowledge that they just didn't get in art school. So you're not going to receive all of the knowledge that you're going to need to produce masterpieces after graduating from an expensive art school. There are things that they leave out, and different art schools will focus on different things that they think are more important. And what they focus on may not be the most important things. But in their mind, it's more important to learn what they are teaching you rather than other things that may be much more important, but they can't see it. So there's no guarantee that after graduating from an expensive art school that you're going to be this master artist. Another thing you have to be aware of is if you're going to paint a sunlit scene, like in this case, you have to know how much saturation to give to a color. That is, how intense should it be? For example, right now there isn't much of a feeling of sunlight falling on this building. That's because the color here isn't saturated enough. So what I'm going to do is go to the color picker and then pick a more saturated color and a color that leans a little toward the orange, since there is some yellow from the yellow sun mixing with the red, as I mentioned earlier. So something like this maybe, more saturated color, and now I'm going to apply that to the building, and you can see immediately that a greater feeling now of sunlight hitting the building has occurred. So you have to get the saturation right to get that feeling of sunlight falling on whatever form you've painted. In addition to knowing what the saturation of the color should be, you also need to be aware of value, and that value will also change depending on the intensity of the light source. So therefore, now that I've added this more saturated color here, I've also added a lighter value than the value that was there before with that more dull or more neutralized red compared to this red here, which is not a pure red. It's more of a red that leans a little toward the orange, as I mentioned earlier, because of this mixing of the yellow color of the sun with the red color of the barn, which is the local color. Local color will be modified by the color of the light source falling upon that local color. And here I've just given you a brief example of how that occurs. But there's much more to learn, and I can't show you everything in this one video. It's impossible to learn everything that you need to know without engaging in a lengthy course of study that covers these subjects and shows you various examples. There's no other way to master this. You can't watch one video and then think that, oh, now I know it all and I'm going to be able to paint masterpieces. Unfortunately, it's not that easy. It's very difficult to learn all this and to be able to apply it to your own paintings. That's where a lot of practice work comes in. I'm going to add another element to this list here, which is very important for you to learn about in order to be able to paint pictures that have a realistic appearance to them. That is, pictures that look believable. People will believe that this is a sunlit scene, or this is a moonlit scene, or it's an overcast day. Whatever you want to paint, you need to know how to use these various elements, but in addition to that, there's another element that I'm going to add, which is ambient light. Now, what is ambient light? It can be defined as reflections from various surfaces that produce a uniform illumination. So therefore, the sky is considered ambient light because it produces this kind of uniform illumination that I just mentioned. It's very important for you to understand that the blue of the sky is coming down, so to speak, like that, and entering into the cast shadows of objects. So therefore, if I have a cast shadow, let's say over here on this side, right there, the shadow's being cast, of course, by the building. The blue of the sky is going to appear within that cast shadow. So I'm going to darken that blue a little bit. Something like this, maybe. And by doing that, the cast shadow gains a more realistic appearance because that's what happens in real life. The blue of the sky enters into cast shadows. The idea of the blue of the sky following this downward descent in a vertical direction like that is very important to understand because it is the planes or the forms that are facing up toward the sky that receives the blue color of the sky. It is not the side planes of an object that receives the blue color of the sky. Only those planes that are facing up toward the sky. So therefore, a side plane like this here wouldn't receive any of the color of the sky. This part here, which has these planes that are facing upward, will receive the blue of the sky if this part of the building is in shadow. So I'm going to place it in shadow, like this. And now I can add some of that blue color of the sky into this plane here. And you know what a plane is. It's a flat surface that has height and width but no depth. So I've just added some of that blue of the sky, but this plane here, which is a vertical plane and not facing the sky, doesn't receive any of that blue of the sky. This part here, where the roof is facing up toward the sky. So therefore, that upper part of the roof is going to receive some of the blue of the sky. But the planes that are further down will not receive any of the color of the sky. It's only those planes that are further up, closer to the sky, that will be influenced by the color of the sky and partake of that blue color. The planes that are further down, such as these planes here, they will partake or receive reflected light or bounce light from the ground. So therefore, some of this green here is going to be reflected within this plane here, this vertical plane. And also on the other side over here. When I mentioned the side plane, take a look up here. The side plane, of course, is this, the vertical surface, the vertical plane. That's the side plane that doesn't receive the blue color of the sky. But the top plane here, since it is facing up toward the sky, if it is in shadow, will receive the blue color of the sky. So here's another side plane. On this side, again, it wouldn't receive any of the blue of the sky, but if I added a cast shadow over here, since this shadow or plane is facing up toward the sky, it will receive some of that blue color of the sky, just as I showed you over here. Since what I've just shown you is something that happens in nature, and you apply that to your own paintings, they will appear more realistic looking. They will appear more believable. This, as well as some of the other things that I've mentioned and that I've listed over here, need to be applied to your paintings. If they're not, then that is a sign of an amateur, of someone that really doesn't know or understand what needs to be done to paint really great pictures. All the great artists that know what they're doing, they're all applying these things, but in addition to these, there are some other things that they are also applying that I really can't cover in detail here, but I can make you aware of them. So to this list, I'm going to add what is called an occlusion shadow. So what is an occlusion shadow? Well, I'm going to just quickly give you an example here, again with this cube form, and I'll add a cast shadow right here where the two planes meet. That is the side plane of this cube right there and the ground plane over here. They meet right there. That's where the darkest part of the cast shadow occurs. And that's where the least amount of light can get to. So therefore, it's called an occlusion shadow. And the darkness of the shadow diminishes as it moves further away from where that edge occurs. So I'm going to lighten the shadow like this, you see? Or you could say the shadow darkens more and more as it approaches that edge where those two planes, the vertical plane of the cube and the ground plane, meet. So an occlusion shadow is the darkest part of the cast shadow due to a reduction of ambient or reflected light. Now there's a lot more examples that you're going to need to see to thoroughly understand this and be able to apply it to your own paintings. But at least here you've gotten some idea of what an occlusion shadow is. It's the kind of shadow that you find in crevices where the light just can't get to it. The building looks rather flat. You have to know how form is created. And form is three-dimensional. So how do you get a three-dimensional appearance? Well, you use what is called the three-value rule. Right now, these values are too similar, and therefore there's this flat look to the building. However, if I add a lighter value to one of the sides, this side here, like that, and then slightly darker value for the roof. Go back to the color picker. Like that. And then the darkest value is found here, where the shadow is. And I think I have to darken the roof a little bit more. So something like this. What I've set up here are three values. 1, 2, and 3. The three-value rule has been applied, and now there is a feeling of a three-dimensional form here that was lacking before. This is what it looks like before, more flat. This is what it looks like now. It has more form. So, seen in a simple diagram, the three-value rule looks like what I'm going to apply to this cube here. So, this part of the cube will have the darkest value. Then the side plane here is going to have a lighter value, and the lightest value is found at the top, right there. So I have three different values, and you can see that this cube looks like it has dimension, like a three-dimensional form now. And that's because of these three different values that have been added, just as I added three different values to the building here. I'm going to add a lighter value to the roof here. And I'm going to turn the color painting into a grayscale so that you can see the values. You can see the different values, the light values, the darker, and the darkest values, three values. Now this is just very rough, but I really don't need to do a finished painting here to get these ideas across to you. You should be able to understand what I've shown you just with this rough sketch and be able to apply this idea to your own paintings. And you're going to see a dramatic improvement in what your forms look like in terms of whether they look more flat or whether they have more form. Then I'm going to add a red color right there under the roof. See right there? And this part needs to be a little bit more irregular at the edge, more like this building is falling apart. Then I could add a lighter value to that edge, something like that. And I could add that window that was there before. Also, you need to keep perspective in mind. So you need to know perspective. Very important that the objects that you draw are in correct perspective. If they're not in correct perspective, people will feel that there's something wrong with this drawing or painting, but they won't be able to put their finger on it. And then you can add darker accents like I'm doing right here within the shadow. These dark accents also help to give the shadow a greater feeling of transparency. And also you can give some definition to those forms that are in the shadow by adding these kind of dark accents. And they also help to create a greater feeling of a solid three-dimensional form as well. One thing I want to mention again, and that is this roof here, as I mentioned earlier, is a plane that is facing up toward the sky. So it's not just this top part of the roof that is going to receive the blue color of the sky. It's actually going to be the whole roof, because the whole roof is being exposed to the color of the sky, pointing up toward the sky. And the sky color, as I said, is coming down. So since it's coming down, and this roof is positioned so that it's facing up toward the sky, the entire roof is going to receive some of that blue color. One of the things that art students repeatedly get wrong is when they want to paint a scene in which the light source is the sun, and they want the feeling of the sun falling on whatever they're painting so that it looks like it is being lit by the sun. And what art students tend to do, or beginning art students tend to do, if they haven't learned the correct way to paint, is that part that is receiving the light, like in this case here, this part, they will add white to whatever color they're using to paint that part of the object with. So if the object has a red local color, what the student will do is add white. So in the color picker, the closer I move to white, that means that I'm adding more and more white, and thereby the color is being reduced in its saturation and it is becoming more neutralized. So adding white to a saturated color will desaturate that color, and it will become a grayed, a neutralized color. So therefore, if it's something like this, and the student adds that, you see what happens? The hue is lost. Hue refers to what the color is, the name of the color, like a red hue or a green hue, a blue hue. And what you end up with is something that looks like a neutralized color, a neutral color, a color that doesn't have any or a strong saturation within it, giving the feeling of warm sunlight falling on that object. You don't get that feeling here. There isn't enough color. It's too neutral. This is too neutral. But if I do something like this, going back to the color picker, and I select the color that doesn't have a lot of white in it, but that is a saturated color like this, for example, and I add that, now you get a feeling of warmth, of this warm sunlight hitting this part of the building that I wasn't able to get by adding a color that had too much white in it and that neutralized that color. So you need to add more saturated color to those parts of the object that you are painting that is receiving light, warm light. There could be, of course, also cool light, but in this case I'm talking about warm light. And I might even be able to make that even more saturated, like this, keeping the color rich, warm looking, and even the roof right there can receive some of that warm, rich, more saturated color, thereby giving a feeling of sunlight on this part of the building. And I'll put that little window back there like that. What you've seen so far is the kind of things that are going to make the big difference between your work remaining at an amateur level or your work becoming more and more professional looking. And if you're not getting this kind of knowledge from the free videos that you're watching or the art school that you might be going to, then I can tell you right now you're not making any progress, because it is only through gaining this kind of practical knowledge and being able to apply it to your own paintings that you're going to make progress, and you're going to move from that beginner level toward becoming a professional artist, an artist who knows what he or she is doing and is able to produce really great looking work. So unless you're getting this kind of knowledge, you're not making any progress. I can tell you that now. You're not moving forward. If you can't see any big difference in your work after taking an expensive art course, after a short amount of time, not a long time, but a short amount of time, then I can tell you you're not getting the right knowledge. And what I could do down here is maybe there's some barrels down here that are receiving some of that light, and over here as well where the door is. And don't use the same color everywhere. It needs to be changed. Students have a tendency to use the same color in the foreground and the background. On the objects that they paint, everywhere is the same color. And I'm just doing this really quick, as you can see. And right here where the figure is, I could add maybe a yellow orange maybe. And a brighter, lighter yellow can be added as well, where more of the light is hitting this figure. Then texture could be added, like the tiles in the roof. And you have to keep scale in mind. If you want the building to look large, you need to add smaller tiles and smaller objects added will make the building look bigger. And right here where the barrels are, the color is too much the same as in other places, so I'm going to change that. So maybe the barrels are a little bit more red right there. Right here where the walkway is, I could add a warm color like this. And it creates this path that leads the eye right in toward the building. The orange building needs to be related to its environment better. And the way you can do that is to repeat that orange color in other parts of the environment, thereby creating a link between the building and the environment in which it is in. And one of those links I just created by adding that orange walkway. But if I did something like this and added some orange color to the green like that, I'm now relating the building to that part of the grass there that has this orange color in it. So just by repeating a color like that, you can relate one object to another part of the painting so that the object that has that one particular color doesn't look isolated from the rest of the environment. And this could be maybe some flowers here, some orange flowers, something like that. Also back here where the sky is, I could add some of that orange color into the lower part of the sky like that, suggesting a low sun, and it's approaching sundown. Now the sun is more toward the front of the building, thereby the front of the building is receiving most of the light, but not precisely at the front. So what I'm going to do is add a darker value here to this side right there. Remember what I said about light fall off. So therefore this part is going to be darker than this part of the building. So there's going to be some gradation of value, and the cast shadow here also has to be changed, because right now the cast shadow has this direction to it, but if the sun is in front but at a bit of an angle, the cast shadow is going to change somewhat, and it's going to be more like this, going back at that kind of angle, something like that. I'm doing this really quick, as you can see, in real time. And then right here at the base of the building, there's going to be this occlusion shadow that I pointed out to you, where these two planes meet. The plane of the side of the building, which is vertical, and then the plane of the ground plane, which is horizontal. So the darkest part of the shadow, the cast shadow, is going to occur right there, where those two planes meet. So I'm going to go to the color picker and select a really dark value, something like that. And then some tall grass here. I can add that like this. Add some texture. To make your color paintings more interesting and richer in color, use 3 colors. If you only use one color, resulting in a monochromatic look, it's not going to have richness of color, which adds interest to a painting. If you use a duochromatic color scheme, which means 2 colors, that's a bit more sophisticated in color than a monochromatic color scheme, but it still doesn't have the kind of interest that results from using 3 colors, which I used in this rough color sketch. There's the blue of the sky, the orange of the building, and the green of the grass and trees. So this gives a more rich looking color scheme when you use 3 basic colors and then you create variations within that color scheme of 3 basic colors. But I can't go into this in detail here. But these are the kind of things that you need to know. If you don't know them, then your paintings are going to remain at that amateur or beginner level. This is the kind of knowledge you need. And if this isn't the kind of knowledge you're getting from the art school that you're going to, then I can tell you you're wasting your time and your money, because your work is not progressing. You're not moving toward that goal of being able to produce really great looking paintings that will get you the job, that will get you into galleries, that will enable you to make a living at this sort of thing. And right over here where the fence is, what I can do is I can repeat the color of the sky. So I'll add that blue to the fence, and let me pick that up from the sky. So something like this. This creates color balance. When you repeat the same color in other places within a painting, it helps to create a balance of color. It's like blue up here, blue down here, blue over here, blue over here. There's a balance that's set up. So I'll just continue adding that fence, something like this. The fence is almost falling apart as well. And then I need to add a bit more of the blue sky color to parts that are in the shadow, like for example right there. That roof is facing up toward the sky, therefore it's receiving some of that blue color from the sky. And that blue helps to cool down the warm shadow. So the blue is being repeated in different parts of the painting. Also down here where the cast shadow is. Remember what I said about the cast shadow receiving color from the sky. And then I'll do some more work on this part right here. So there are these tall grasses like that pointing over toward the building, and on this side as well. And I think I'll make them even darker in parts. So right here, add a dark. Helps to add more depth because this part is darker than that part. And placing a dark on this side and having one on that side helps to create balance. I also need to add a shadow right there, just cast by that roof. Something like that helps to add depth to that part of the building. And some holes here and there, like that, little holes. The whole building is sagging. Gravity is pulling it downward, like that. You see, it's sagging. Everything should be sagging. This part here also should be sagging. There are many things for you to learn, and I've just touched upon a few of these important things that you're going to need to understand and be able to apply. Even if you ignore this now, sometime in your studies, you're going to come across this again if you're lucky. And you're going to discover eventually that this is of the greatest importance and that you're going to need to be able to apply this sort of thing to your paintings. Otherwise, they're just going to remain at the amateur level. I need to add a cast shadow here where the fence posts are, running across the walkway at a similar angle than the cast shadow here where the building is. So something like that, and then over here where the other fence posts are, they also are casting a cast shadow like that. I'm going to add another important element of picture making, which I listed right there, atmosphere. So as the forms recede further back in space, they take on some of the blue color of the atmosphere. Thereby, those distant parts of this landscape will become more bluish looking. So these green trees here will turn a bit toward the blue. We'll have some of that blue in there, and that will also make them appear as though they are further back in space, and the edges also become soft. Everything softens as it moves further back in space, like that, you see? And immediately you get the feeling that those trees are now even further back in space than they were before I added the blue. And also on the ground, right there and here, I could add a little bit of that blue as well, thereby pushing that part of the landscape further back in space. Edges are softened. The harder edges are up front. And you can see that right here, for example, and here. These are sharper edges, while the edges on the forms further back have a softer edge to them. And then way back here, I have these blue mountains. Becoming a better artist is largely a matter, as I see it, of acquiring the right kind of knowledge about what makes really great pictures and being able to apply that knowledge. In this video, I've introduced you to some of the most important things that you really need to know about, understand, and be able to apply before you can make any kind of progress in art, before your amateur work becomes more and more professional looking. It's this kind of knowledge, and only this kind of knowledge, that will make that big difference. So, if you think you're going to get all the knowledge you need by watching a lot of free videos, I hate to disappoint you. Unfortunately, while you can learn many things from free videos, there are also many things that are withheld from those videos. So therefore, they're not going to show you all of the really important things that you need to know to transform your beginner's work into more professional looking work. So while you're going to be able to acquire a certain amount of knowledge watching free videos, unfortunately, it's not going to be enough to turn you into a really great artist. And that's where art school comes in. Now you can, of course, become an artist and learn the things you need to know on your own without going to an art school. But let me tell you, it's going to make it 10 times more difficult to become that artist that you want to be if you're going to go it alone. What you can learn within a few minutes from a really good art school may take you years to learn on your own. I'm trying to let you know that since time is so precious, you can't waste a minute of it in your development as an artist. You can't go down the wrong road and learn the wrong things, which result in bad paintings. You have to be able to recognize what is important, what is significant, when you hear it, when you see it. If you can't, then you're in big trouble, because then you're going to be accepting things that may not be important, because you can't see that they are not really important. And you ignore what is really important and you accept what isn't so important. And that will be detrimental to your art. So it's the art student that has that ability within them to recognize what is really important, what is really significant, and then to try to understand it better and better and apply it to their own work. Those are the students that make the most rapid progress. And now, thank you for watching. Until we meet again, So long, and good luck in your studies.